All right, let's go ahead and call a meeting to order. Thursday, October 3rd, 6:30. To accommodate Jessica's minor delay, we'll go ahead and skip down to the previous meeting minutes. Go through those. Take a vote. I have no concerns, but I wasn't present, so I will abstain from the vote. Those that were present, we go ahead and.
I'll make a motion to set the notice out. You guys that was here.
All in favor? Yeah. All right, that's approved as written. No changes, no modifications needed. Is there anything else we need to discuss from the previous meeting? Or should we jump into new business? Okay, let's jump into new business. I think we have a comprehensive plan workshop on Max Johnson. Johnson.
Johnson, yep. Just out of curiosity, am I the main item on the agenda or are there other things?
You are.
Maybe then. So, hello everyone, I'm Max Johnstone. I'm the senior planner for the Mid-Coast Council of Governments. I assist communities in various capacity needs, grant writing, site plan review, in Bristol's case, comprehensive plans. I think you all have worked with my boss, Matthew Eddy, when LD 2003 was being done. He told me back then how the comp plan was probably on my radar and I needed to be ready, and I did not listen to him apparently. So I was kind of brought in to try and see if there's some way of getting this comp plan a bit changed and listening a bit more to the community so that it's something that might be able to pass a town vote and be accepted by the residents. And I clearly haven't been out in meetings or doing a lot of public discussions with people. I think the last time I was actually being recorded in Bristol was back in July when I first talked with the select board on this matter. Since then, I've just been going back to some recorded meetings that were available, looking at the comp plan, having some private interviews with people, and just trying to get an idea, trying to get some fresh perspective. I've been listening. That's all I wanted to do. And that's why I'm having the first public meeting tonight, because I want to listen to the planning board. I feel one of the things that I've missed, or what was missed, has been a discussion with the planning board. It feels like there was two silos, comp plan, planning board. That's not how a comp plan should be done. There needs to be communication between the two parties, because beyond the residents themselves, you, the planning board, are dealing with the future land use section. You're the ones who kind of get impacted the most from what's being done. And I want to make sure I can hear your voice so that when I do have to go out to the residents again, and I do mean I have to go out to the residents and hear their opinions on this, I want to be able to alter the comprehensive plan so that it does have your voice in it. And so you do feel represented. That's what I want to do. I understand there's some people in town who just don't want the comp plan. I can't change opinions, but I can try and have people see eye to eye with this. And I just want to hear them out, see if there's something I can do to try and address those issues. So with all that said, I'm not going to have like 50 questions I want to go through. I really want to have more from the discussion. I want to hear your thoughts. And I know it's going to lead to some horrible language. Just remember, we're recording.
Before you begin on that, I was just wondering, and I haven't been to the last few meetings, so maybe you guys all know the answer to this, but where do we stand right now as far as the comp plan and the schedule and that type of thing? Do you know that?
As in revisions or timeline to get it done, or what do you
Yeah.
mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, timeline to get it done, I guess would be a start, or maybe that's a question for you, maybe you know.
So I wanted to just talk with the planning board first, make sure I get as much information as needed. Hopefully, we don't have to go beyond one meeting. Hopefully, I can get everything I need to hear tonight. And then once I do, I wanted to have a publicized public meeting
Okay.
after the election. I don't want people to think that the comp plan is going to be on the November warrant. I wanted to avoid that type of thing, and I wanted to give plenty of time for people to be aware that I was going to have this meeting. So that there's time for people to go back to the comp plan and hopefully look at it a bit more. So,
So you're not trying to squeeze it in for November,
no, I don't want to do that. I don't want people to think I'm trying to force anything for it.
okay,
I want to aim for maybe early December public hearing. Or public discussion, I should say.
Yep, yep.
So that I can just say, I've talked with everyone, these are the things I want to address. Give everyone a chance now to say what needs to change when I'm going through this plan. So that when I do make those changes, I can say, this is what you all said back in December. I gave you that chance.
mhm.
Any other questions on the timeline, concerns about that?
Just a quick follow-up, are we at risk of having to redo certain things because of the information that was collected?
The data that was provided by the state would have to be updated, but from what I was told by the select board, that was already a concern when I was doing this anyways.
Okay,
And I double checked this with the state. And they've said that it's just going back through the state review, but you're not changing anything, really. It's just DEP has to look at it again through their checklist. The ACF has to go through their checklist. DMR has to go through their checklist again. You're not going back to square one.
okay, so as far as population data and that type of thing that was collected,
I can just, that's already available at the state. I can collect that anytime.
okay, okay, just curious.
No, it's a good question. It's a fair point. Any other questions about how I'm gonna do the process, or should I just jump right into asking you guys about your thoughts in general?
Jump right in.
So, contain your laughter. I've been hoping to hear from everyone, something that you don't like and needs to change in the plan, and then something positive you do like in the plan. Doesn't matter how small it is, it could be one sentence that acknowledges something you like. It could be the font, it could be the format, I don't care. Something that you want to change and something that needs to stay in that plan. What do you like? What do you not like? I want to hear that from every single one of them. Mind starting?
Sure, I'll start. I'll start on improve. And that is, it concerns me and probably a lot of residents that we spent a substantial amount of money. And we promised that it would meet state standards and requirements. We spent the money
Yep.
and it did not. That's a concern you're gonna hear throughout the community. Trust me.
Make it state standard.
As far as, something I liked, it was a great history lesson. I mean, I think there's probably 50 pages or more on Bristol and how great of a town it is. So that's important.
Okay.
Start with I'll do the opposite. I'll start with the positive. I thought the inventory chapters had a lot of great information. Very extensive, things I never thought of, never would have even looked at. And then, as far as improvements, my biggest concern and the biggest concern I heard echoed was mostly about the perception of the future land use maps, and I'd like to see that kind of to change a little bit and maybe be a little bit more flexible.
When you say more flexible, can you describe that a little bit
Like-
more?
Some transition zones built into it, so it doesn't appear that the town wants to focus all the development just in the village areas and then restrict out from there. I think we can just kind of make some adjustments to that. So there's more options, more flexibility.
Okay. So rate information in the inventory, be a bit more flexible in the future land use map. And we are gonna talk about the future land use map a bit later on. I do want to get everyone's thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I would say my main concern would be the future land use map as well. The way that it's zoned. Proposed zoning
Mhm.
is an issue in the way it's described in the definitions or lack thereof, you know. The definition of the actual areas.
Zoning is an issue. And then something you liked?
Um. Yeah, it had a lot of good information in it. You know. Just historical facts and just data about the town.
Okay. Mind starting next?
Yeah, we already got a mountain of regulations now. And I believe in people's property rights, I was brought up to. From my dad and my brother's word. And I feel a lot of the people that was on that committee need to learn how to live in Maine. They moved here for a different environment. I think they need to listen to the people that come from many generations in this town. Some of them built, bought, or remodeled their dream home in Maine, sitting on that committee. I felt like we were being attacked by them, our property rights, with some of the stuff that they were saying. And a lot of us that grew up in this town with old family land we inherited, we got a plan with that. The next generation gets it. We could have filled our pockets full of money selling it off, the biggest real estate boom we've ever seen. And we're hanging on to that for the next generation to build a house or start a commercial business so they can afford to live here. And I'm not in favor of any of that. And the positive thing about it is I'm sitting in this chair on this committee tonight. Voicing my opinion with the comp committee. I feel that people wanted me to be here because I kind of slugged it out with them, I guess you could say. At times I felt like I was the one, by myself. The Bristol gym that night back in December, I had allies all over the place, hallelujah.
Mhm.
They didn't want it either. But the number one thing is I believe in people's property rights and I do everything I can to see that they get what they ask for.
Okay. And that's part of what, that is one of the big things that I did here, from everything. The interviews, the workshops, the comments, people felt their property rights were being threatened,
Yeah.
especially with how the
And
future land use.
thing is, I felt like, I don't think a lot of these people, a lot of them haven't lived here that long.
Mhm,
I don't think they realize just how good they got it here.
mhm.
Basically, what I've heard is, from some of them, they've dragged the environment that they moved away from here. And, there's a lot of good people on that committee too. I don't wanna sound like I'm dislike everybody there, cause I do like a lot of them. But, they need to listen to us.
And that's why the select board wanted me to come in, so I could listen. And so I can put that into the plan. Make sure that what you're talking about does get reflected.
And another thing, I think some of the things that they were talking about would have raised our property taxes higher than they are now. I felt like the taxes probably in the last 8 or 10 years have pretty much have doubled, like, from some of their plans. I think Maine, you know, the simple life, I think we need to hang on to that. And not run this town like some big city.
So I don't mean to cut you off, and I'm sure you have
Right,
more
huh?
thoughts. I'm sure you have more thoughts. I do want to just keep in mind time and everything, and I'm glad to stay afterwards if you want to chat a bit more. With everything you just said, is there something you do like about the plan? Anything at all?
Nothing.
Do you like that it ends?
I like it's done.
Mhm.
And I'll leave it at that for now.
I like that it's done.
The positive thing for me, and I've heard other people talk about it. It was a great, I'm not from there, so it was great for me to learn more about the background here. I love it here.
Mhm.
The fundamental problem that I have with it is. And I don't know what the mechanism is to correct this, but I think. The local people I know. That are from here. Really didn't get to have any input.
Mhm.
And I think that that mechanism was. Kind of overlooked. I think a lot of the true feelings came out in the December 7 public hearing. I applaud Frank for having the gumption to get on this board. I think I think there are a lot of people that have very similar feelings to what he did. So I know quite a few people from here that have those same feelings.
Mhm.
I don't know how you correct that, but I think unless you can correct that and get a lot of local input,
Mhm.
I don't see how it's gonna pass.
That's the thing about comp plans. If you don't have a good public outreach process, then it won't pass.
Yeah, and there's a side of that, and I brought this up in the little bit of involvement we had. I mean, the plan, as it ended up, really doesn't talk about zoning,
Mhm.
but in fact, you know, it's a template for zoning, which can be pretty damn, aggressive and unfortunate for a lot of people. And I guess that goes to the land use as much as anything.
Any other thoughts, or?
But that's enough for now, yeah.
I'm gonna say that what I like about it, I'll mirror what everybody else said, the inventory chapters are great, they give a good snapshot of what our town is like now. Which isn't what it was like 20 years ago or 40 years ago. And honestly, I like the fact that it exists. And I'm not sure that, that's mirrored with a lot of people. I'm glad it was done. I'm glad we're doing it. I really hope that we can get it to a point where it can be passed. Because I think that there's a lot of good that can come from a comprehensive plan. The negatives, I'm gonna try not to say anything that anybody else said, because those were top of my list.
I don't
But,
mind it being repeated.
well, all those things plus, really kind of, the amount, the action items and all the suggestions in this plan, the dollar amount that equaled is
Mhm.
just overwhelming. So although I can understand the committee was trying to build something to keep the town the same
Mhm.
by putting all these rules in place and committees and, you know, all this stuff, all of those items equal dollars. And as it happens, I didn't know I grabbed this notebook, but it's what I had at the public hearing. And you don't have to write this down, but I had made a short list here of, there were 135 action items in it. 17 items that raised taxes, 8 areas that limited personal use of their property, 8 new committees and or positions, 7 new ordinances and plans. That is a lot of money. And I don't know if anybody has taken a look at what the taxes have done the last 5 years. We had 2020, 2021, 21 and 22 more or less stay the same. 23 jumped way up, 24 jumped way up. And as somebody that deals with housing and, tenants in particular, it's a tough pill to swallow to have to start raising money, rents on people and having to tell them why. And if this stuff starts to go into place, that's just gonna go through the roof. And higher taxes are not what's gonna be good for local people. That's one of the best things about our town and the only things that are keeping local people here. Is our low taxes. So it's the money impact, financial impact really is gonna be my item.
I'm gonna just quickly hop over to you, detour before, because I know where you'll go on a tangent. Positive and a negative about the comprehensive plan, from your perspective.
Yeah,
It can be anything, don't worry.
it's kind of hard to kind of like put new things out on the table, but you know, my positive is I applaud and I know how hard of a job it is to do something like this and a comp plan, and they had a lot of people in the beginning, and I know they still had a lot of people towards the end to come together and create one document with a ton of people. I know that's a lot of work and it's really hard. Like, you know, Andrew said, I like how the inventory chapters are laid out. And how they've, you know, they've presented it, put it together. They've got a lot of good information in it. My concern, or what I don't like, is to go back to like the feedback, the public feedback. There was a lot of weight placed on the surveys done at the beginning and throughout the process, but there was little to no weight put on in the public hearings and the responses from the state. I think a lot of the negative feedback was kind of discarded while the surveys were heavily like weighed in a positive. And my concern with that and the plan is that everybody has their preferred platform on how they want to get their information to the boards or committees that are making documents like this. And if a survey isn't their avenue, and their avenue is to come to a public hearing and say something, that weight needs to be put on that just as high as weight on a survey. I just lost where I was gonna go and I'm so sorry.
Don't worry if you won't.
I'll come back, but
We'll come
yeah,
back and
those are
I
my,
want you to try and get that thought, and once you know it, tell me and I wanna hear it.
yes.
Getting back to the circle.
Okay, I'm not a member of the planning board, code enforcement officer, so that's why I'm here. The positive is the comp plan and its process has made the town take a look forward.
Mm.
And you need the plan because change is going to happen to all of us, no matter whether we like it or not. So we need to be able to voice everybody's desires and wants and needs in that. And the only way to do that is this kind of an exercise. And it also allows for a benefit of grants and things through the state that without a comp plan legally backing up your ordinances, you don't really have. One of the things that I don't like is the restrictive nature of zoning with parentheses. I think there can be a much less smaller focus on that and make it maybe allowable zoning. For instance, neighborhoods that are 70% built up and their houses are 20 feet from a road on a private road that don't impact safety. Maybe you could say those neighborhoods could allow for closer setbacks than our standard 50 feet, which is everywhere in town. There's no change with that. That is what it is. And maybe you could say, okay, these neighborhoods, we can allow houses to be closer to the street, to be more like their neighbors and not have every single house that is new have to make that setback. that's zoning, really. But it's allowable zoning, it's
Right.
beneficial zoning, not that all zoning is negative and non-beneficial, but there's a way to do smaller increments with
You're
this.
encouraging more development to happen at certain areas because that might be a better spot for the denser stuff or maybe president.
In that vein, all of which needs to be talked through and adapted or whatever, but yes, that's the thing. I think one of the unfortunate things that I saw was a head scratcher in that we want to focus growth in neighborhoods that are already saturated, which doesn't make any sense to me with a town that has no municipal services as far as water and sewer. There's a reason why we have a 1 acre minimum lot size, so that you can support a septic system and be far enough away from your neighbor's well, so that everybody is safe and healthy and, you know, promotes all of those things. The neighborhoods that are congested more, I don't think that's where you want the growth. That's my opinion.
I'm not, if you want to say anything, I'm open to it.
No, that's it.
Okay, okay. You
I
got it?
remember what I was gonna
What were you
say,
gonna say?
apologies, so thank you. My other thing that I wanted to bring about the plan and this whole process that I didn't like about the plan, or it's not so much the plan, it's more the process, is throughout the process, yes, they had their meetings and they, were writing the plan, but there was no document presented that people could meander and look through to either say, hey, I question that, or I don't question that, or I agree with that, until almost the very end of the process. I know us as a planning board didn't see the completed document until, I don't know, was it September? I don't know what the date was, but it was really late in the game. And when we then voice our objections to things we've read or reviewed in the plan, that's, that whole process kind of got dropped off. And I think that was my other big concern, is that we didn't see it till the end. We didn't see it until it was a completed document. And then it makes it really hard to change things once the document's done, so.
And just on that note on the process, so as I said, I want to talk about the future land use map, and that's already something a few of you have already brought up as a bit of concern. Last May, I think May 2023, there was a land use workshop where North Star had presented 4 different potential future land use maps. It was open to the public and people could come in and weigh in which one they liked and why they didn't like some other ones. Was anyone from this, you were in attendance? You were in attendance, anyone else? The people who didn't raise your hands, were you aware that that workshop was happening?
Absolutely.
Okay. So your perspective from that workshop. What did you think of the maps that were shown?
Well, how it was presented at the workshop was that there are 4 very different ideas. And that when all things were said and done, the map would never look like any one of those, because ideas would be pulled from everything and kind of put together, and whatever the feedback was would kind of shape what the maps were. And I think the turnout was okay. It was 75 or so people, which was pretty good for one of those workshops, but it still wasn't really a wide snapshot of the town. And I think a lot of the focus on most of the comments, the positive comments toward the maps, went towards the, I can't remember what the names were, but the conservation phase 1 and the village phase 1 had the 2.
Yes.
The ones that made it look like there would be less building in town.
Right.
So, and that's what made it into the final plan was the name of the village-based idea, but the map from the conservation-based idea. And I feel like even though that was obviously what was most popular at that meeting, it didn't reflect that at the public hearing in December. That wasn't what the voices said. And I know there were several people there that went through the thing and didn't leave a single comment, and that's, I put a few on, but if you don't participate in it, then the voice isn't gonna be heard.
What were your thoughts from that meeting? Or that workshop?
I went into it, I will say I went into it, once I noticed that there were just 4 maps to review, I went into it kind of. Pessimistic, I guess is the best word to use. That was the very first meeting that the planning board was ever invited to. And when there were 4 maps presented, I know I heard a lot of people saying that I wouldn't choose any of those maps. And I think a lot of those people, those were the people that walked away and said, I'm not leaving a comment because none of these are what I'm looking for. So of those 75 people, there were a lot of voices that weren't heard because they had nowhere to leave their voice. Like they did not have a map to put their opinion on. There was no way to share that at that point. So I think there was a lot of things lost that could have been discussed.
And I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the future land use map that ended up being put in the comp plan. The growth areas with the supposed light transitional ring that's around the villages, and everything else is critical rural. I'm sure everyone's familiar with them. So I'm gonna start by saying I don't typically put in a critical rural district. I always feel that should be a town that really wants it for that preservation purpose. I don't feel it's necessary. I always stick with just growth area, rural area, and a transitional area. Transitional, so you can have a little flexibility. So with that in mind, with the idea of a growth area, a transitional area, and a rural area, how would you change the map? That was, we already got the idea of maybe not putting the 3 villages in the growth area since it's saturated. So I'm gonna go the opposite way now, starting with you. Where would you put the growth areas in Bristol, if you would do that at all?
I'd like to start with, what does the state require as a minimum? Because this town doesn't really need zoning. We have shoreline zoning, which protects all of our significant wildlife habitat, coast, the entire coast of the town is controlled with development, and how much you can cover the lot with non-vegetated surface, all of those things are already done and have been since the 70s. So do we really need that? Whatever the state says is the very minimum. Can we do affirmative zoning, like I mentioned before, about allowing things to happen in certain areas that don't necessarily happen in areas that don't need to have less than a 50-foot setback, those kinds of things. I'd like to see that someone who's had land in their family for generations that doesn't happen to be in a growth area can still put a commercial building on it if they want, if it comes before the planning board and the planning board says, sure, this is an appropriate use in this area.
So with what the state's gonna look for growth areas, they're looking at places where there might be some infrastructure, or where the town believes it might be where more focused development should happen. So it doesn't have to necessarily be multifamily, but even the example you gave just a minute ago of saying, well, maybe this area over here doesn't need an acre, maybe it needs half an acre, because that's where we want to have people building, focused building, and maybe we want to encourage it. The state usually looks at villages as the default, because historically that's what people have been building. You have to give sort of an excuse when you have to send that off to the state saying, well, we don't want growth areas at all. And at the very least, that's why I say transitional areas, because you're not committing yourself to a growth area. But you're at least telling everyone, we need to keep an eye on this area, because it could become this great big area.
If the focus were in making certain areas more attractive to
Mhm.
certain kinds of development, sure.
Mhm.
But I want to get, I think it'd be much better to get away from negative,
Right.
restrictive zoning.
And that's the other reason why I don't use critical rural, like what's in this one. I would just keep it as rural, so that if you want to build a house, you can build a house. As long as, you know, you're not building a flood.
And if you build a shop for a home business or a plumber or an electrician or something, that's okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. No, but I'm not
I'm fine
making,
with that.
I'm not making the zoning ordinance. This is supposed to be sort of the base, the foundation, so that if you do want to start saying, well, this is where we want to encourage it, or this is where we want people to, I don't know, have less restrictions over here. That's your base map for what's your growth area. So that's,
I'm good with that.
okay, so with that in mind, growth areas, transitionals, rural. Or still sort of the same answer that you just gave.
Still the same answer. I think the locations need to be thought of a little bit more. Not necessarily focused in the villages,
Mhm.
but the outskirts of the villages. Maybe around 130 mostly. Maybe if you want to keep them away from some of the shoreland areas, sure. There's only a 250-foot buffer for shoreland zoning. If you kind of want to move away from that a little bit more, that's fine too. I think it's a minimalist approach to any kind of zoning that I'm looking at
Okay,
in general.
Okay, so that's a really tough question to answer. When I was reading through this,
Mhm.
the rural areas, they say are good places for larger affordable senior housing projects. And that the growth areas could be friendly density with small 2-3 unit buildings. So I had a really hard time understanding what
Yeah, that's mixed up.
the definition is. I mean, if we're going kind of logical, what you said in places where we want a little bit more focused development in town and other places where we kind of want to relax things. I'm gonna mirror a little bit what Joe said about our shoreland zoning in that we have a lot of shoreland in town. We have, we might be sitting in shoreland zoning
Yeah, I
right
see, I
here.
see the map on it.
We are.
Yeah, so, you know, my thought, especially in the villages where we do have shoreland.
Mhm.
Why not just kind of mirror that language, and if we want to bring it out a little bit further from the 250 feet and say, well, you know, along here. And we have, it's already laid out, whether it's village or. I can't remember all the different things, residential, commercial, all the different things, resource protection, why not just kind of expand that in the areas it's already in? Was always my thought before this thing even came to happen, because I know zoning will probably happen in my lifetime. So, you know, that would kind of be my thought is, I think what Joe was saying is look at our existing villages and little developments all around town. Off of Route 130 alone, we have all these private roads, they're not town roads. And we've got developments, and there are some older ones where houses are closer to the road. And I don't know if you were saying so much like, hey, let's allow them to put a whole bunch of buildings on a teeny tiny lot. I don't think that's what you're saying. You were saying, let's take a look at the setbacks in the villages, and let's not make people go back 50 feet if everybody else is close.
And that's sort of the other thing we can talk about with growth areas, but saying a growth area doesn't mean we're committing that to be where everyone needs built. It could just be, well, now the setbacks change down there,
Yeah.
or that's what the planning board would decide. I'm not making a zoning ordinance, I'm just saying.
Right.
This is what you guys will talk about in the future.
So I think a good definition of what these areas mean would be super helpful. Because it was, I didn't understand what they were trying to say in there. And if we were trying to look at good locations for larger affordable or senior housing projects. Cluster housing, things like that. I would also say probably along Route 130. Maybe even between here and town is kind of your logical choice. But you know, I don't know what that would look like as far as zoning, because you hate to restrict anything, you know what I mean?
Would it help when I'm at the future land use map saying that when we're talking about growth areas, I'm not saying people can't do anything in the rural area, but the growth area just gives more relaxed standards? Is that maybe a better way of going about it?
A positive. What approach is
Positive.
absolutely.
Very quickly, how does everyone think about that? Not having the growth area as the only place you build, but the growth area is where more positive flexibility can happen for people to build.
So just my opinion,
Yeah,
it's the whole town's growth area,
the whole time.
right? I mean, it's silly to think that we're gonna focus concentrations of people
Mhm,
in Round Pond,
mhm.
in New Harbor, and all these villages that are already way overbuilt, probably,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now all of a sudden, 20 years from now, we wanna keep taxes in mind, we need municipal sewer, water and everything else. Why are we gonna call those places growth areas? It makes no sense.
Sometimes just recognizing what the growth areas are helps with the reason or the goal for where to develop, like, let's just say hypothetically, this area we're at, that's just the only identified growth area. And so if the town does want to build sewer, where would you want us to be? You're saying build sewer all throughout the town, or where there might be a
No, my
identity?
point is to avoid needing municipal sewer and water. Don't keep shoving and labeling Round Pond and these other villages as growth areas.
So you're,
Counterintuitive.
so you're saying,
Counterproductive.
so you're sort of saying, don't call anything a growth area, or just call all of.
Correct.
Okay.
Because why would you push everybody to the village or encourage development in the villages when we're already, I mean, Joe says it himself, an acre. You know, is probably sufficient for well and septic. I mean, we start reducing lot sizes and all these other things that go along, because that's where you start. There's all of us, you know. Relax the standards on setbacks and whatnot, well, that's how it begins, and then it ends with, well, now we're down to quarter acre size lots or 10th acre size lots. And 15 houses in a row. I know it's not here today or 10 years or 20 years down the road, but that's where we're headed if you use that kind of methodology. And that's my concern with the way this plan was written. Because the growth areas were in those villages and those already concentrated areas.
And the idea so far about maybe having it on the state road going.
I think it's the better way to attack it, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with Joe. Yeah.
But even at that, there are so many unbuilt one lot acres along there or everywhere in
Right.
town. I don't understand why we would want to relax things further
Correct.
in order
Right.
to encourage growth in a particular area, because we don't really have, you know, water, sewer, or anything that would benefit from that. You know, the only thing that we offer that would be beneficial to more growth in an area is a state road. I mean, that's all we got, unless I'm wrong, unless anybody can think of anything else.
The ambulance can get to you faster.
The ambulance can get to you faster and the fire trucks, and it's closer to town and
That's
the
it.
hospital and. But I mean, that's all we have to offer as far as services here, so.
And to try to kind of build off that too is, and what you were both saying, you know, I think, I hear what you're saying is like, okay, we designate areas as growth areas, so if we do build this area up, we can then plan for future public sewer and public water, and this is can kind of be our forward growth. But if the townspeople, the voters, don't want to bring in a public water and a public sewer system. Ultimately, they wouldn't, and this is just one of the many moving parts, but they wouldn't have to. They don't want to focus on saying this village area is the growth area, because we don't want to bring what that means. We don't want a public water system and we don't want a public sewer system because of the amount of money it's going to Like,
And then everybody in town has to pay for just
Sure.
their stuff.
right, but my point
Yeah.
being is like, I think ultimately that's what it's trying to say is if you designate your growth in specific areas, that means in the future, this is what, it'll be easier to put a public septic here, a public, wastewater and public water and everything, but if the town, that's not what the town's goal is our goal to do that? And I think that's probably one of the things that's kind of missing in this whole conversation is, are we looking as a town to at some point have a public water and sewer system? Because if that's not what the town people want,
Mhm.
then we need to refocus on why we want to designate a growth area. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree with that.
I'm back to the minimalistic
Yeah,
approach.
yeah.
Do whatever the bare minimum you need to do to satisfy the state.
Yep.
Declare the whole town a growth area, fine, but don't change any of the requirements. That's fine. You can relax some things in certain identified neighborhoods for setbacks or whatever makes sense in the future. The planning board has the latitude to do that.
Mhm.
But let's not say we want to concentrate things over here. Because the guy that owns an acre or 10 can do what he wants
get a
with
bit-
it.
They'll be a bit ticked off.
Let's be realistic. I've been here 25 years. And it hasn't changed a lot, and that's good.
Mhm.
We're not on the way to anywhere. We're not Damascotta,
Mhm.
Waldoboro. We're not that. You have to want to be here to come here. Aside from the beach and the lighthouse and the state park, we get day travelers and weekenders and that kind of thing, but we don't get a lot of the through traffic or the service center work here. It's a retirement area. And there's some tourist-based industry here, but not a huge amount, and I don't see where that's going to change unless there's a bridge to Monhegan down at the point. And, that's a whole different thing, because I come from Cape Cod,
Mhm.
where this is a whole nother level of infrastructure and zoning and everything else, and we don't want to go there.
Yeah, no, I don't wanna get to Cape Cod levels here. You guys aren't Cape Cod.
Well, again, what is the concern? Is it affordable housing? That's why we want to do that. We've got the LD 2003. We've got cluster housing already in
Yep.
our ordinances. Is the concern that we're gonna turn into Booth Bay and somebody's gonna come and buy everything up and put in a golf course and put in condominiums? And I mean, that maybe is a
Has the-
concern. I don't know. I
Well,
want somebody to tell me like.
Has the board ever entertained a developer wanting to do cluster development here?
No,
No,
And the subdivision ordinance has been in effect from the 90s.
right. So-
Nobody has ever wanted to do that here because they're not gonna make money doing that. That's the other thing. You can say all you want about, affordable housing and everything. Who's going to come and do that to make money to do it?
Probably no one when there's 2 towns that have sewer and water north of you. I'm not arguing on
Yeah.
that.
No, I'm not saying why.
The only thing I would say on the growth area, 2 things. One is with some state funding, whenever they're talking about or state grant money, it's just noting it. Hey, this area or this parcel's in our growth area. That's why it's a bit favorable to start giving us some money into that area. And so to your point of saying, we'll just call the whole thing a growth area. Then we have LD 2003, which my boss helped you with it, but I don't know the exact language of what you guys put in. If it's in a growth area, that means an affordable housing development can go in there. It means multiple houses are allowed, but again, it sounds like
We already
no one's
have
gonna
that.
do that. You already have that, so it's not a concern. So the whole area could be called a growth area if you wanted.
I have had some interest in multiple housing,
Mhm.
tiny homes, those kinds of things.
Mhm.
They haven't gone anywhere yet, but there have been those
They've been-
inquiries.
And then just from there, I'm looking at the clock. I don't want to hold us past 8. I don't know about you, but once it gets to 8 o'clock, usually I start losing myself. So I don't want to hold us past then. But from this corner, it sounds like I'm hearing 2 different things. One is growth area, just go on the state 130, or don't even talk about growth areas, just rural growth area, people just build. Anyone?
Well, my concern is relaxing the standards.
Hmm.
I think that
Don't relax the standards.
do not relax the standards. And we've got. Really, we don't have any facilities. And we've got geophysical constraints on. What you can do with a whole lot of the peninsula. And, I don't know, I'm of the thinking anyway that, you know, it's, none of this has ever been a problem in the past.
Mhm.
So I would hate to do a lot of restrictive stuff.
Is that the same sentiment? I see you popped your hand up once or twice.
I was just gonna say that I liked. I could see where Joe was going when he was talking about the idea of like more allowable zoning.
Hmm.
And in ways, we've kind of done that with setbacks, where it says in the land use ordinance, if you're doing a renovation over 50%, and the house burns down or whatever, you have to meet the standards as much as practical. And that's determined by the planning board. So if a house in Round Pond Village is getting completely gutted and renovated and they're 48 feet from the road, they could come to the planning board and say, hey, we're not changing the footprint of the house. We're remodeling the inside, putting on a new roof. It's not practical to move it 2 feet to meet the setback. So we allow some leeway there. I also think if somebody buys a 1 acre lot in Round Pond Village, and the best place to build the house is 40 feet from the road where all the other houses already are, I can see why Joe suggested, is that really taking away from the character of the village? No. So if we were gonna have a growth area that was village centric, I would agree that it should radiate out the major travel corridors from the villages. In the rural areas, stay how it is now in town. So if you want to allow some extra things in those village centric areas, not a lot. Public sewer is not gonna happen here. Our villages are too spread out. It would cost tens of millions of dollars. Put in a treatment plant, and then you're looking at permanent closures of the shellfish grounds because you're dumping it overboard. You can't put it in the Pembroke River, it's Class A water, can't do it. It's gonna cost tens of millions of dollars to send it to Damascotta if they said they would take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and there's a whole bunch of different constructs that, so it wouldn't necessarily be taxpayers paying for it. If it's the district, it's the users that pay for it. It's not the people that aren't hooked to the system. A whole bunch of things there, but it's not practical here, so. Village-based growth where we might allow some setback leeway, but keep a 1 acre lot minimum. I mean, I think it's doable. And as far as critical rural, if we wanted to keep that on the map, places like Laverna or places that are already designated preserves, give them the dark green. You can always add more as more places get put into conservation, but don't make a third of the town appear to be not conducive to building. That's kind of the way I felt about it.
I think the minimalist approach to this would be the best. I agree with that. I think keeping this town, aside from the shoreline or, zone, keeping the town under one zone would be the best, the way it is now. Keeping a lot of the same ordinances we have, and with the ability to maybe change some of them, like Joe was saying, and other people have said. If we want to, as we see fit.
I have a very strong feeling I know what you're gonna say when talking about land use maps.
No more regulations.
Even good regulation?
Keep it simple. Maine is simple life.
Not even so the reduced setback thing, if that was his option, just make it a townwide item.
I didn't hear what you said.
So like, we're talking about maybe growth area, not really meaning everywhere else is restricted, but if this one area allows lower setbacks instead. You would just say, well, just make the lower setbacks throughout the whole town instead.
Like if somebody wanted to build in Round Pond on a vacant lot, which there
Where
probably
is
isn't.
that? Pretty
I
far.
know, but say there was one,
Yeah,
would they have to put their house further back from everybody else's? Or could they build it right along the same line, even though it might be closer to the road than they're supposed to be?
common sense.
Yeah, so, and I think the wording, like you said, as far as practical, that could be expanded to say, to fit in with the character of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that exists in other ordinances.
Isn't that what the appeals? That's what the
That's the
appeals
appeals
board
board.
town used to do. They used
Yeah.
to. You came up to them and they judged it
And they gave you a variance.
and they gave you the variance, probably 95% of the time. That was like 30, 40 years ago when I was there. I don't know what it is today, but basically. It was made up of WW2 and Korean War veterans that, you know, fought for freedom in this country. They had a whole different outlaw than what's going on today.
But in terms of the variance, I don't know how often the Board of Appeals meets and gives a variance.
It's
Not
been
anymore, not mine.
like 3 or 4 years, hasn't it?
We don't have a sitting Board of Appeals right now. It's been that long since,
Well, there we
there
go.
has been one.
Yeah.
The state requirements for,
Yeah. Got your contact.
There's
The
no
state-
appeals board in town anymore?
there's not one that's been
Just-
appointed right now.
But only,
But I have people I can call.
but it's only because there's been no appeals. Like, there's been no request for
So
it.
how long has that been down the road?
The last appeal was 4 years ago, I think.
Wow.
Is that the trailers on the dump road?
Foster.
Foster?
Yeah, I think
No,
It's
One
a
after
bonus
that.
one.
no,
the Warren,
it was since then.
They wanted
It,
it around.
it was since then, but
Okay.
not,
yeah,
Oh, I
At
yeah, I
least
remember
3
that one too. They were close to the same time frame though, within.
yeah.
the state requirements for how an appeals board can make the decision has changed over the years to make it very difficult to grant a variance. It's just the way.
Wow,
That's
they're
just the
all
way it
over
is.
it.
When we sit at our meeting, next week, you're coming, right?
Yep,
You'll learn all about that.
because the idea has kind of changed from just giving a variance every now and then to you really shouldn't be relying on the variance. You should just change the ordinance if people keep coming back to that same.
Which is what we did with the trailer thing. That's exactly what we did. The appeals board couldn't issue them a variance. And then the planning board took up and amended the land use ordinance so that if that came before you again, you could say, okay, we can make that decision. Yes, you can be 47 feet from the road instead of 50.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
You explained why we need a growth area because of state grants. Among other things. Why do we need a rural area? Just so I understand.
It's more just differentiating the two. That's pretty much it. Like, if you do ever want to have a zone. I'm not
Mhm.
saying anyone has to do it. I had Appleton very recently with the same thing. Where when talking about growth in rural areas, they said with the state, you have to have a very good reason for saying why you don't have a growth area, why there is no historically an area where people keep building right there, like you have villages. It's kind of hard to ignore that fact. The rural areas, so if another state law happens like LD 2003. It doesn't have to apply to those rural areas, so you are preserving the farmland, the natural areas, the single family lots, things like that, whereas the growth area might be where you have the working waterfront, so you want to get some more funding to focus on repairs to that or expanding that. We keep talking about sewer and water, that's the other bread and butter with growth areas, but
So rural areas potentially could be exempted from things like LD 2003.
yeah,
If you designate a growth area, LD 2003 will kick in, except that you still have to comply with the septic regulations.
yes,
So because we don't have municipal sewer and water, even though they are allowed to have multi extra dwelling units in the growth area, they won't be able to in Bristol because we don't have municipal sewer. They have to abide
they
by,
still have to show they have a septic and a water that can
yeah,
handle those.
and it doesn't apply to shoreline zone properties anyway.
Right.
So we're kind of okay with that, growth areas around the village, just to say that, okay, that's fine. We're not allowing anything more. You don't have to, is my understanding.
And I mean, again, with Appleton, when talking about it, they ended up deciding to make their village just a transitional area. Just to say, hey, let's keep an eye on this, let's see how it goes in the next 5 or so years, revisit it at the next comp plan. And then they just chose this little strip that's along a state road near, I think it was Hope, as their growth area, because. Hey, if something is gonna happen, it's gonna be over there where there's flat land, it's away from a lot of these resources. That's just gonna be the growth area. Doesn't mean they're actually gonna continue pursuing anything, they're not doing any zoning changes, at least not that I'm aware of, but they just said. That's our growth area, that's a transitional area,
So is everything rural then for them?
everything else is rural for Appleton.
Okay,
They have, I think it was a 1 mile little circle around the village saying. It's transitional, we're just gonna keep an eye on it, that's it. And then this is a growth area where,
That kind of a positive presentation and information about what can happen if you don't do this. And how we can just kind of be there.
Mhm.
That's what's needed, that's what's gonna make people say, oh, okay, I understand now.
You know, it'd be an interesting map, and I don't know if we've done one, is to see what houses were built or additions, significant additions. That change the use of the property from the seasonal to primary residence. Occurred year by year in the town of Bristol for the last 5 or say 10 years. And that would develop a trend of where those growth areas are naturally occurring. And allow us to develop a pattern and maybe rethink the whole thing altogether. Just food for thought. We talked about a lot of emotions and ideas here, but nothing's factually based. Be nice to see some actual statistics behind what we're talking about.
so. Past 5
And
years,
maybe I missed it, but I never saw a map like that.
well, maybe not a map, but that's certainly something that is usually encouraged when doing the future land use section to say, this is what should be.
But I didn't.
I know, and then that's why I'm saying you do have a point there, and that's a very valid point to what you're saying, that. What is the record?
Right.
I assume there is a record of all the building permits and everything. You don't get rid of them, right? Oh, hold on, you can answer that after the done recording if you want.
We have a record of building permits that were granted for individual properties.
Mhm.
The problem is that there has been no building permits required for renovations,
Mhm.
period. End of conversation. So there is no record for someone who has remodeled a house unless they were expanding the footprint or, you know, that kind of thing that would trigger it.
Or putting in new septic.
Or putting in a new septic system, yeah, but that is not really the same thing. Cause you can have the same exact house, nothing had been touched, and
New
put it
septic.
just have a new septic system.
However, I'm gonna build off that. When the assessors are here doing their job, they take the new septic permit applications and visit those properties to see if anything has changed in the property. However, there's not a recorded list of that anywhere. It's just an increase in valuation. It's not gonna be
but even just a new construction would give an idea.
Why not look at this?
So, and so that's what I can make sure is included in this section if it's not already done. Or at least. And you'd prefer maybe a map of that rather than just in writing,
Well, I think it helps show
to
you,
visually see it.
right, visually.
Okay.
Where those natural growth patterns are occurring. And I bet you what you're gonna see is houses are built throughout the entire town. Right?
Yeah, and
That's
then,
my guess,
right,
right, and not concentrated in the villages. So I
no, and if that's the case, that determines the future language map. That's how some towns have come
but
to
that's
that
just my
conclusion.
guess.
Right.
Hypothesis.
Then, you know, future land use maps are always gonna be different from different towns.
Yes.
You know, Appleton, that was the case where they didn't really have a growth area map, they didn't have a future land use map. They did have a village, it's hard not to recognize that. But they also see this undeveloped piece over here, that's closer to a town that might have a lot more development, they said, that's our growth area. We wanna still preserve the rest of the rural area. And then the village we wanna keep an eye on. Other towns. They just keep reusing what they've had for so long. And then ones that also don't have any growth areas, they go in what you have, just the data. If it's all over the air, if it's all over Bristol. We probably don't have to really point out a growth area like that. You could do the Appleton model. And it's also supposed to be based on your shoreline zone map as well. No one's gonna build in a restricted area or conserved lands, am I right? So. I have my notes on everything, and we're in the last half hour before 8. Again, I don't know how long you guys usually have your meetings. I don't wanna hold you up.
We'll go to midnight, so.
Yeah, but I also drive an hour home, so.
I'm joking.
We've never gone to bed. Maybe like 9. But I'm not suggesting.
So, in this last half hour, I'll just open it up to anything else, really. It's something that you didn't think I touched on, something you want me to keep in mind moving forward. Again, I'm gonna have a public meeting, and I'm gonna try and make sure I have a month's worth of notice in the newspaper and however else you guys want me to advertise it. Because I want everyone to be in town, and I want them all to tell me what he needs to change in this comp plan, just like all of you have done with me tonight. And simply asking you guys to give me a chance to work on this plan, to get your voices heard. That's all I want to do. So,
What's your mechanism for that? Are you going to just ask questions or wait for public comment? Or are you gonna have some type of?
it's the same thing, sort of like this. I'm going to say, I've talked with people in interviews, I've talked with the planning board. This is the bullet point list of what I feel already has to change.
Yeah.
Other than the factual and the data points that are already a bit out of date. Future land use map definitely has to change.
Yeah.
And then, for me, it's also a formatting item, so, you talked about a lot of strategy items probably need to be taken out. I'm also looking at it, the way I usually like to do these comp plans is having those strategies and goals up front. So that people who don't have time to read 300 pages can just read the first 20 pages and call it a day if they want. And then just meet the state goals.
And I think I had asked you before at one point about like going through the inventory chapters and all the different things that have been laid out in the plan and possibly like at some point in a public hearing or some format, asking people like, what of these items are important to you? Like, are these all things that we legitimately need in the plan, or are there?
All the strategy items.
Yeah, and there was one that I hung my hat on, but I couldn't remember what it was.
And so that's the option that we can also do. I always like to have a committee or at least someone I can go to. I don't know if that will end up being the select board. I don't know if that is the select board designating me to you. I don't know if this is a third party group of just different committees and boards just reviewing the suggested changes. So that it is the different town committees and boards reviewing it rather than us having a restart the whole session, but. I do wanna go over those people. And I just give sorry, I know you were about to say something, but I was gonna say, I like to always go in from my perspective, third party. No influence from everything else going on and saying, is this necessary? Is this necessary? This doesn't make sense, and get some feedback on that.
So you're spearheading this effort.
That's what
You're
the
the
contract,
central person for the entire.
that's what the contract. Christina might, yeah, I'm apparently that guy.
Hey, Craig, so you're the stockkeeper. Okay.
Yep.
I had one other quick question. In the towns that you've helped with comp plans. Can you think of a town off your brain that you've worked with that's had a passable plan with the state that is extremely simple and extremely like streamlined and.
I think that's an easy answer.
Appleton,
Sounds like it.
Yeah,
Appleton.
Yeah,
Appleton would probably be the most straightforward one I can think of. As, I'm gonna get judged for a lot of this. Appleton. I'm gonna get judged for
so
some of the
what
things.
that was very simple.
West Path was very simple. To be fair with that, I didn't have to worry too much on the future land use map because it had zoning there. And they didn't want to change anything. It was, for West Bath, they told me just cut out the fluff. Just get right to the point. Tell us what the state standards are. Let us put in our local input and move on.
That's what we're.
And that's kind of what I think we're looking for.
Yeah,
Well, and one of the other things on this is, I think that the plan really starts on page 32. And
Yes,
The 30 pages before that is all trying to sell the idea of why you need a comp plan. And that is just gonna turn a lot of people off.
It's irrelevant. If
It's
you pass the
irrelevant.
comp plan, then
It's irrelevant and it is a turnoff, because I don't wanna be sold on this. I just wanna see what the plan is and make my own decision. I don't need somebody to try to tell me why it's such a great idea.
I
There
think,
was a lot of redundancy.
Oh, so many. The vision statement wasn't there
Really.
twice, wasn't even the same.
yeah,
Um,
that's part of what,
And I think you're gonna have to do that. I mean, if the idea is you're gonna get a lot of good local input. I mean,
Make it
there are a
10
lot,
pages.
there are a lot of people that are already
A
well,
lot of things.
and that's.
predisposed to.
it just needs to be a factual document
Yeah.
instead of a story.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I wanna make sure I have the public input before I make all these changes, so that I just hear from everyone, hey, look. I got my butcher's cleaver right over here,
Right.
I got the big stack of meat right over there, just tell me where I need to start trimming that fat off.
You know, I think all of us, or the people that were involved in this one, we understand the benefit
Mhm.
to the town of having some type of comprehensive plan.
Right.
That the state approves. But, you know, you've got a lot of people now that are really predisposed to just
Shoot it down meat.
ding it right now, and that's gonna be a tough job,
Mhm.
I think.
I think if you can sell people on the rural area, the rural areas where nothing changes from how it is now. It doesn't, we're not being more restricted, we're just saying this is. And then the growth areas are things where we might allow certain other things.
A little flexibility.
I think that's the whole thing that's turned a lot of people off with land use map is the idea that seeing that the green section is like, well, I can't do anything there. And that's not necessarily the intent. Especially for the rural area, it'd be like, that's where we maintain the status quo.
So cleaning up the definitions would
Yeah.
probably help a
Yeah.
lot.
Well, and I've heard, maybe we should make the whole thing a growth area, maybe we should make the whole thing a rural area. Doesn't matter really which way you go, other than this potential state funding or not having to follow new rules. I mean, do you see for Bristol, if we're gonna make all of it one thing? Like, which way?
The other thing that I would just say on the zoning, is recently Lincolnville. They had growth areas, they had zoning, they had all this defined back in the 90s, they never did zoning. So there's a quick thing for you there, just because it says growth area, doesn't mean you have to make zoning on that. Before they've done the most recent update, they had, Dollar General interested in building in their community, and they didn't have zoning. And so they quickly put a moratorium, and they wanted to get the comp plan addressed, they wanted to get the zoning all addressed. All within this moratorium, because they technically had no legal right to stop Dollar General from moving in. I don't care what people thought about how all that went, I'm just saying, that's the importance of the zoning, it may not be a problem now, you may not think there's any problem in the last 30 years. That doesn't mean something will happen in the next 30 years, my boss used to say, government isn't 2 steps ahead, we're usually 5 steps behind.
Right.
Then something controversial happens.
But if you made the whole thing rural.
Yep.
Nothing would actually change. With zoning, or we don't have zoning, but with our rules, their land use ordinance, is that true? Wouldn't have to, right?
No, and if you want to change the zoning, you can always just.
Or the land use
Even-
ordinance.
Even with growth areas, you don't have to.
So if everything was
right?
growth area, could everything stay the same?
Good.
Okay, so I guess my question is which would be the better way to go?
You could have everything as the growth area, but maybe with the idea that was said. Someone said it earlier, where maybe just acknowledging what's conserved land. Should still be in this rural or critical rural, were you the one? Yeah, you were talking about critical rural areas. At least acknowledging what is conserved land and what. Is possibly flooded areas and you don't want to encourage people to build down there.
Right.
Like, and I also want to just quickly say. When I'm done with my changes, whatever the committee is, whether it's gonna be select board, some third party committee, doesn't matter. I will come back to you guys to get your opinions on this before I go for any approval. And I want to make sure you can all at least say, hey, I actually like this plan. Or at least I can swallow this, I can swallow this bitter pill
Well, the reason I asked that
instead of
is,
chasing me out of town.
The reason I ask that is because I think a large majority of the people, if
Mhm.
you zone everything the same.
Mhm.
When you first said that, I was like, that's ridiculous, but I think if you zone everything the same and say, nothing's actually changing. They're gonna believe you, but if you have two different areas,
Mhm.
then people start to say, well.
Why are they different?
Why are they different? And what does that mean? And why am I in rural? Or why am I in growth? So I guess it's a little bit more education on my own part
Mhm.
to understand the ramifications of going one way versus the other, and is there a benefit of separating out certain areas? And how do you sell that to the town?
So I can talk with, Tom at BACF about this. I don't think I've ever had a town ask to just be entirely rural area. I always have a town that has a very interesting request, so I can check that. Anything else? And again, I'll stick around afterwards if you wanna talk about anything else, it just didn't want to be recorded. But any other thoughts, comments? Last rites before I end up going to the firing lines.
Good luck.
Good
Thank you
luck.
for helping.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, then. Sounds good. I'm all set then.
Thank you.
For sure.
I didn't start the meeting. Who started the meeting?
I did.
Want to continue?
Already here.
Okay.
You already closed out the minutes from last meeting.
My apologies, everybody, for being late. I came from 2 hours away and it took a little longer than I thought. All right, so we talked about the comp plan. One thing I just wanted to remind everybody that's not on the agenda real quick is the meeting. If you guys didn't already talk about the training next week. Okay, so again, we had mentioned we're gonna have the MMA Zoom training next Thursday. It's from 4:30 to 8:30. Yep, we're having it at the New Harbor.
On vacation, so I don't know.
Okay, the plan is to have it at the New Harbor Fire Station. Town will pay for it for everybody. It's the,
But we have to sign up.
right, and we have to sign up like ASAP. It's a public,
So
it's
you
a,
let me know, I can sign everyone up. If
Yeah.
I miss anyone, you can watch the thing and you get credit.
Let's do that now. Sign me up.
Okay, so Joe, I know Andrew said yes, John
Yeah,
said he
yeah.
was, Jessica.
Yep.
Joe.
I've already done it, I'm not doing it again.
Well, I've already done it too, but don't we get a discount?
My last was 10 years ago, so I'll go.
Yeah.
I only did it like 2 years ago, 2 or 3. so.
Yeah, it lowers the town's liability insurance.
Do we, I mean, does the whole board?
Should.
The more people that do it, the more points or
More-
credits they
How
get
long
towards
is it
it.
good for? I've been to one.
How long is it good for? I don't know, but I'm sure that there's things that have changed or been
Oh, I'm
updated. Like
sure.
I took it when I first started the town. I'm sure there's a ton of things
I'm
that,
sure.
And certainly everybody
Plus,
that's never done it should do it.
yeah.
Anybody else?
We're gonna do pizza and drinks and stuff, so there will be food, you'll be fed.
Before I actually started.
Andrew, you're gonna come, right?
I'll have to check my calendar.
Okay.
Frank, come with us.
Frank's gonna be there.
So this is like 4 to 1?
4:30 to 8:30 next Thursday. Food and drinks,
What kind of drink?
non-alcoholic drinks.
Oh. I don't know, I'll have to think about it.
Well, Erin needs
got
to know
quite a
it
bit
ASAP, so she can,
She needs to know.
because she's gonna sign you up.
She is signing it.
She is signing you up, so you're gonna be there?
Sounds like it.
Okay,
Yeah, come on.
okay. I,
I
no,
just did it
Ben,
2 years
Ben's
ago.
done
Not
it.
doing it.
Mike, no? Okay,
So I'm gonna be there.
yes, you are. Thank you. All right, next item is public comment. Any public comments? Sorry, my back is to everybody. All right.
Yeah, I'm here to talk about the comp plan.
Sorry, too late. Follow-up meetings, Joe, or follow-up items, do you have anything coming that we need to know about or, okay? Anybody else have any follow-up items? All right, in that
You can
case,
sign it up.
Motion to adjourn.
I motion that we adjourn.
Okay,
Back to
okay. Out, we're done.
the-
I will, I see that.
4:30 to 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I did it.
I'm doing it, I'm not.
That way you can meet that. Then you can.